We have new details this morning on President Trump's new crackdown on crime in a city he loves to criticize in his own backyard, our nation's capital, our home, Washington, D.C. As part of his new week-long campaign, some 450 federal law enforcement officers from various agencies were stationed across the city last night in high-traffic areas. And Trump announced on social media that tomorrow he will hold an event at the White House that will, quote, essentially stop violent crime in D.C., which he claims has become one of the most dangerous cities in the world. Never mind that violent crime is actually down 26% from last year when it was at a 30-year low. The president has long had a habit of trashing the city where he currently lives, but he went into a new frenzy this week after a former DOJ staffer was attacked in an attempted carjacking. Trump has threatened to federalize Washington, D.C., and even send in the National Guard. Here's how he put it on Wednesday.
We're going to beautify the city. We're going to make it beautiful. And what a shame. The rate of crime, the rate of muggings, killings, and everything else, we're not going to let it. And that includes bringing in the National Guard, maybe very quickly, too. This has to be the best-run place in the country, not the worst-run place in the country. And it has so much potential, and we're going to take care of it.
Joining us now, Washington, D.C.'s Mayor Muriel Bowser. Mayor, thank you for joining us this morning. First, we want to know, and what I think a lot of people want to know, is do you know what the president is going to say tomorrow?
Well, this is what I know, Eugene, is that we have spent over the last 2 years driving down violent crime in this city, driving it down to a 30-year low, in fact. Over the past year, and thank you for showing, we have decreased violent crime by 26%. The year before that by 35%. It is true that we had a terrible spike in crime in 2023, but this is not 2023. This is 2025. And we've done that by working with the community, working with the police, working with our prosecutors, and in fact, working with the federal government.
Mayor Bowser, you've talked to the president in the past. That is part of the job that you have, is to talk with presidents. They're right down the street from your office. Typically, if a president was going to do something like this, they might call the mayor and say, hey, this is what we're thinking about doing. When was the last time you talked to President Trump? And when have you talked to him about this?
I talked to him several weeks ago when we were in the Oval Office, and I've talked to him about crime repeatedly, including in my first meeting with him after he was elected. So the president is very aware of our efforts. He established a task force, which our police department and agencies support with information and anything else they ask us for. And so while it is always the president's prerogative to use federal law enforcement or the National Guard even, you know, I've talked on your show before that the D.C. National Guard is the president's National Guard. Right. So that's always his prerogative. And federal law enforcement is always on the street in D.C., and we always work cooperatively with them. The National Park Service, for example, polices national parks. And then we have a lot of national parks. The FBI and ATF always work cooperatively with us on high-end or upper-level coordinated violent crime. And we've had some very successful takedowns with them. It is clear that the president, and I suspect that his announcement is that he is surging federal law enforcement, which he's talked about, and he may talk about even larger numbers or longer periods of time. He's interested in being in neighborhoods and fighting crime in neighborhoods. And to the extent that officers know our laws, that officers work in community and work with prosecutors to build good cases and establish a presence and work with local officials who are, you know, the experts in policing and making arrests, that's what we're waiting to see.
Madam Mayor, I'm just curious what you think think is going on here? And I ask this question because, last night, Saturday night in Washington, about 450 federal law enforcement officers were spread out across all of the four quarters of the District of Columbia. And here are the arrests from last night. Multiple persons carrying a pistol without license, fugitive wanted from Maryland, driving on suspended license, dirt bike riding in the park, 3 handguns seized last night with one of the firearms discovered to be stolen. I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, but that to me sounds like a run-of-the-mill evening in a large metropolitan city. So what do you think is truly going on here with the president's fascination with quote-unquote violent crime? And even Stephen Miller, the senior advisor to the president, deputy White House chief of staff, saying that Washington, D.C. is, quote, worse than Baghdad.
Well, I'll leave that to you to analyze what some of the underlying motives may be, Jonathan. But this is what I know. We are not experiencing a crime spike. We do know that this task force has been focused on quality of life issues. And as you note, that sounds like a typical MPD rundown of arrests that I review on a daily basis. And MPD is one of the best agencies in the world, and they police in a very complicated urban environment in the best city in the world. And one reason I wanted to be here today is to let people know that their nation's capital is among the most beautiful and best cities in the world. It's well run. We have excellent schools, the #1 park system. We have experienced rises in tourism compared to before the pandemic. So people are coming to our capital, they're starting business in our capital, and they're raising families in our capital. And any comparison to a war-torn country is hyperbolic and false. I also just really want to say we always want to get better. And there are ways more than any other city in America that the federal government can help the District of Columbia. Our city is unique. Our prosecutor is a federal prosecutor. Our judges are appointed by the President of the United States. And by the way, we have 15 vacancies in the Superior Court, which we need to go down to the Congress for approval. We have 2 vacancies in the Court of Appeals, which we need to go down. So anytime you have a backlog in the courts, you have delayed justice and people are less safe. Our council has also worked cooperatively with me to change our local laws to hold people accountable. And one of the best pieces that we have moved has allowed us to hold violent offenders, people who use guns, to hold them pre-trial. And since we moved that emergency in 2023, we've seen shootings and homicides precipitously drop. So we know we're holding the right people and holding the right people accountable. There's more to do. We need judges. You heard Jeanine Pirro says she needs prosecutors, and we need police in D.C. I'd like to hire 500 great people over the course of the next several years to get our numbers where they need to be. And D.C. is hiring. So if you're interested in policing in the best city in the world, please reach out to us.
Mayor Bowser, you talked about how the National Guard in D.C. is the president's National Guard. You talked about the possibility that he could send them out into the streets of D.C. That would seem to be quite provocative and disruptive to the people who live there. How provocative would that be if the president did indeed send in the National Guard?
Well, I'm concerned about that for this reason. I have the ability to call on the National Guard by making a request to the Department of Defense. And they're not law enforcement officials. These are men and women who leave their families to serve our country, and that is just not their primary role, to enforce local laws. So I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about them not being used efficiently. And I just think that's not the most efficient use of our Guard. But as I said, that's the president's call about how to deploy the Guard. And you are right to be concerned about just the presence of being provocative in communities, sometimes communities that can feel harassed and attacked. And my message to our constituents is all officials, whether they're Guard or other federal officials, have to act in a constitutional way. And residents have rights, and everybody has to follow the law. But that's always our message. Everybody has to follow. Everybody has to follow the law. And so in D.C., for example, all of our police have body-worn camera. It's accountability on the side of law enforcement and for the community. And so to the extent that officials are coming to the city that aren't following the types of protocols that we have, I'd be concerned about the exposure for the federal government or any of those agencies.
Madam Mayor, two-part question for you. One, how concerned are you that tomorrow the president could announce that he's taking over the Metropolitan Police Department? Is that something he could do?
There are very specific things in our law that would allow the president to have more control over our police department. None of those conditions exist in our city right now. As I mentioned, we are not experiencing a spike in crime. In fact, we're watching our crime numbers go down. In fact, the July before this very unfortunate incident with this young man occurred that seems to spurred all of this action. We had one of the lowest crime levels and shootings that we've had in a July in recent history. So not only are we going down year to year, we're seeing the trends go in the right way. In every crime category, by the way, carjacking had been our most concerning group of crimes since 2023, and we've seen a 50% drop since 2023. And this year, we're also seeing that decline.
And Madam Mayor, a final question for you. You, in this entire interview, you have put out the facts. We have put the facts on the screen. How do you convince the President of the United States that what you have been saying is right, true, and fair?
Listen, what our focus with the president has been is to focus on shared priorities. Even in that clip you played, he talked about making D.C. the most beautiful city. So his task force has been focused on federal properties, which they could have been focused on all along. Cutting the grass, fixing the fountains, fixing the streetlights. All of that is helpful to us, and we will work on that. I have believed for a long time that Trump had a view that when he left the White House the last time at the height of COVID, he had a lot of concerns about homelessness, as did we. Those conditions simply don't exist now. So we're going to keep talking to the president, working with his people on the issues that are high priority for him. Now, if the priority is to show force in an American city, we know he can do that here. But it won't be because there's a spike in crime.
Madam Mayor, I'm going to get in trouble with our control room, but really quickly, one of the things that we have seen over and over from the president, from his team, Stephen Miller saying it's like Baghdad in Ethiopia. They seem to hold their harshest criticism sometimes for cities that are majority black and brown. Do you see that, and what do you think that means?
I think that I have been dealing kind of with this issue for a number of years. It's kind of easy fodder on the campaign trail. But now we're talking about governing, and my job is to focus on making sure our city is running well, and people enjoy a great quality of life. And I think we're doing a really good job. We do need the federal government's help, as I mentioned, because they have an outsized influence on our criminal justice system. We need more prosecutors. We need more judges. There are other ways to help. Even we want to rebuild our jail, and there are ways that the feds can help with that. But also just doing their part, cutting the grass, fixing the fountains, making sure that federal law enforcement is doing all of the policing that they can do. And I just have to say thank you to MPS, FBI, ATF, who've always worked cooperatively with us, and we expect that they will again.
Mayor Muriel Bowser of the great city of Washington, D.C., thank you very much for coming to The Weekend.
Thank you.
So for more, let's bring in former lead investigator of the January 6th committee, Tim Heaphy, Atlantic staff writer and MSNBC contributor Mark Leibovich, and political commentator Ashley Pratt-Oates. Welcome to all three of you. Tim, you first here, because top Trump administration officials, and that includes Attorney General Pam Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel, they all met at the White House last week to talk strategy around Epstein and other matters. Have we ever seen such close coordination between these two historically independent departments with the White House, let alone when it comes to a matter involving the president?
No, Alex, not in my memory. You're putting your finger on the precise big picture issue here, which is this is not about a criminal investigation. This is not about the facts. This is political, right? Nothing that's happening here is normal. The interview post-conviction of a convicted sex offender by the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, evaluating whether or not she should be given some benefit for testimony, and the release of confidential investigative files, none of that corresponds to how things typically work in the Department of Justice and the criminal justice system. That just reveals that this isn't about the facts. This is about some political narrative that the administration and some of its supporters have been wrangling over for months. And there are real innocent people here at stake. There are victims. There are people whose privacy and could be re-traumatized or could be maligned because of their presence in these files.
So, Ashley, Vice President Vance denied reports about this meeting, saying it would happen at his home. NBC News reported that it actually took place at the White House. And here's what Vice President Vance said about it.
We did meet at the White House yesterday. We actually didn't talk about the Epstein issue at all. That was never meant to be the subject of the meeting. He wants us to be fully transparent, and he wants the credible information out there. So we're working to compile the thousands and thousands of documents that are out there.
Look, only those in attendance are really going to know what was talked about. But does this help with public perception around the case?
I don't think so. I mean, he's out there trying to do the dirty work of the administration and taking the hits because the administration has pledged all along radical transparency, and nothing about this is radical. Well, I will say it is radical, but it is not transparent. And I think the real issue here, right, is the American people deserve answers. And when you have the Attorney General out there saying that these papers have been on her desk, and that was back in February, why are they being withheld from the public? And these strategy sessions are all about one thing: protecting Donald Trump and his political power. It is not about justice for the victims, which is exactly what the DOJ should be focusing on instead.
So, Mark, it's actually been a while since we've heard from Pam Bondi or Kash Patel, despite the heat that they have taken from the MAGA base. And The Independent points out Bondi was a Fox News regular, but hasn't been on the network since June. And she's reportedly been dealing with a personal health issue. But is keeping her out of the limelight and closing ranks a strategy to avoid answering questions on Epstein?
Probably because the first question she will inevitably get if she ever comes before some kind of objective panel or press or something like that will be, well, what about these files that you have on your desk? I mean, that's really the first question that she should get because, you know, she said it. It was presumed to be true. She's the Attorney General of the United States. And I mean, what about it? I think that's probably a big part of the reason. I mean, I don't know what else is at stake here or what else is in play here. But I think the larger issue here is that the Attorney General, the FBI Director, the Deputy Attorney General are not typically involved in damage control or strategy hearings or strategy sessions, whether it's at the White House or the Vice President's house or what have you. Now, if Vance says what he said is true, which is that Epstein's name didn't come up at all in these things, I mean, okay, that's maybe somewhat innocent, but it doesn't mean that there's not strategy or damage control or PR interest being discussed. So, look, this is just one of those things that we now take for granted just because so many lines have been crossed here.
So, Tim, the DOJ moved to have the grand jury exhibits from the Epstein and Maxwell cases released since they were unsuccessful getting the transcripts. Will they get a better result here? And what could those show more than the transcripts would?
Yeah, not much, Alex. I just don't think that the grand jury transcript or exhibits are going to shed much light on the underlying issues in which people are interested. Prosecutors present evidence to grand jurors specifically to obtain indictments. All they have to do is establish that there is probable cause that certain named individuals committed charged offenses. They are not meant to be fulsome presentations of entire investigations. My understanding is that the grand jury transcript was simply a law enforcement officer who was recounting summary highlights of the investigation. There may be some documents, some photos or some documents that were shown to the grand jury. But again, that is unlikely to be the comprehensive account of everything the government learned about Jeffrey Epstein that the public is clamoring to hear.
So, Ashley, the House Oversight Committee subpoenaed a host of high-profile public figures over the Epstein case, but they left out the survivors and the sweetheart deal-maker Alex Acosta. Is this just Republicans dabbling in the politics around this case and not getting to the root issues?
It's all about the show, right? They can show that they're trying to move the needle forward because they know right now that this is actually a bipartisan issue. There's a lot of people who want to see these records released, specifically the client list. And we all know that Donald Trump is likely to be named in those files. And those conversations have been made to the public as well, where it has been said that Trump was connected to Epstein. There's photos, there's files, there's all of these things. So I do think at this point, by leaving out not only the victims, but the one who made the deal with Epstein, that is a huge just slap in the face to the victims. And again, how will justice ever be served if their voices won't be brought to the table? And it looks as though in these strategy conversations, again, they're trying to drown out those voices and preserve the political protections of Donald Trump.
Hey, Tim, as someone who led a congressional investigation, are there any good reasons to leave out Acosta and the survivors? And what are the chances we eventually see some kind of a public hearing on this by Congress?
Look, Ashley's exactly right. It depends on what your goal is. If the goal is to uncover the facts about what happened with respect to Jeffrey Epstein, then absolutely you'd want the victims. There'd be the tip of the spear as to revealing facts that are important. Alex Acosta was the U.S. attorney who cut some sort of deal with Jeffrey Epstein to dismiss certain cases and insist on a guilty plea to one. Again, if this is about the process that led to that decision, then he would certainly be there. If it's, however, meant to be political grandstanding and forwarding some narrative that they are pursuing some deep state conspiracy, then it makes more sense to bring people in who are 3 or 4 steps removed from the facts. Eric Holder, Loretta Lynch, they were not involved in the day-to-day wheel turning of that investigation. So their relevance to this, very hard to understand.
Mark, I want to ask you about ABC News, which reports that Ghislaine Maxwell said in her discussions with Todd Blanche that President Trump didn't do anything of concern in her presence. Now, NBC News cannot verify this claim, but will the MAGA base buy it?
Ooh, I don't know. I mean, it would certainly strain credibility a great deal. I mean, of course she's going to say that. I mean, what needs to be said also is that the Deputy Attorney General who did this interview, Todd Blanche, is Donald Trump's personal attorney, or was his personal attorney before. So, I mean, I think anyone who's been following this even casually would see that this does not pass any kind of smell test. That would obviously be part of her strategy to get, maybe lighter treatment. She's already been moved to a lesser secure facility. So, look, it's hard to trust this. Presumably, there's a lot of distrust around the MAGA base around this. So, maybe people will think critically going forward. But I think every time something like this happens, you get a sense of what might be in play here, which is just Ghislaine Maxwell trying to get a better deal for herself, and also Donald Trump and everyone on down who might be implicated trying to make this go away.
No matter how hard he tries, Donald Trump has failed to spin the narrative on the Jeffrey Epstein files. Part of that could be the fact that he and his administration keep acting like they've got something to hide. Case in point, NBC confirmed that there was a White House meeting Wednesday night between top officials to discuss an Epstein strategy, even though Vice President J.D. Vance denied a meeting was taking place. this is nothing new. Trump is always expected to use the full power of the government to control his own narratives. Even in his first term, in the midst of the Russia election interference scandal, he asked, quote, "Where is my Roy Cohn?" Roy Cohn, of course, was Trump's former personal lawyer and fixer in the 70s and 80s. Joining us now is someone who knows exactly what it's like to be Trump's Roy Cohn, Michael Cohen, former personal attorney to Donald Trump and principal at Crisis X. He's also the host of the Mea Culpa podcast. I've been on it. Co-host of the Political Beatdown podcast and Substack host and creator of The Real Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen, thank you for coming to the weekend. So explain something to me. Why do you think Vice President Vance lied about an Epstein meeting taking place when we all saw it was taking place at the White House?
Because they can. And something that I want to say here on your show, Americans knowingly elected a king. And this king intends to use the full power of the executive branch, the legislative branch, as well as the judiciary, to go against political opponents. He doesn't care whether or not you say, oh, well, they're hiding something. He doesn't care. As the king sets the rules, and he sets how the game is going to be played. And that's what Donald Trump is doing right now.
Yeah, you know, Roy Cohn helped to create the playbook that Donald Trump has used for years, but you helped to modernize it, right? Like you did some of the same.
Yes.
Yeah, right?
Yes.
And so I guess what's next? And when you look at how Donald Trump has used the playbook that was kind of created for like real estate on the country, how do you think about your part in that and how that's worked out?
Well, look at exactly what Donald has done. Everybody keeps saying, oh, you know, look at the courts. They're holding strong for the American people, for our democracy. No, they're not. In fact, Donald Trump is yet again winning. Just take a look, whether it's the Supreme Court's presidential immunity, all the way now to the lower courts. He has the lower courts capitulating. He has the appellate courts capitulating. And if they somehow manage to defy him, he has the Supreme Court that overturns both. And so he has the game rigged. It's only going to be Americans. It'll be the American voter that will have to turn around and put an end to this. Otherwise, as I say all the time, you know, America's democracy is going to look very, very different after 2026.
Mm-hmm. You know, Michael, I'm just curious, of all the things President Trump has been accused of doing, has been found guilty of doing, none of those things stuck during the campaign. To your point, Americans knowingly elected a king. But this Epstein situation has broken through in ways that the 4 indictments didn't break through.
34 guilty
convictions. The convictions. He's a convicted felon. That didn't stop him from becoming president of the United States. And yet he is catching hell from his base on Epstein. Why? Why do you think that is?
Well, because it's so nefarious, it's so disgusting, and for whatever reason, Republicans actually ran on this entire Democratic cabal of child sex traffickers, of rapists, and they want the answers. All Donald Trump is going to need to do is release the files unredacted. And here's my prediction on that, too. So far, as you know, I've made plenty of predictions, and I'm going to make another one here. Number one, I don't believe that Donald Trump was on Epstein's island. Why? He said it more than 5-6 times, and he says it very openly. Now, Donald Trump says many things openly.
Yeah, I was going to say,
this is different.
He doesn't always flirt with the truth.
That's true, but I know Trump, and I know that he's saying it for a purpose. Now, is he in the file? Absolutely. Why? He's in the black book. He took free flights with Epstein down to Palm Beach. If he turns around and says that he was never on the island, rest assured, he's going to use that as the basis for why this whole thing, again, is a witch hunt against him. He'll take the grain of salt and he'll make it into the entire,
Right, he'll absolve himself.
Yeah. Right. If you were still advising Donald Trump in this moment, what would you?
Well, I can tell you one thing. If I was, there would be no democracy left, because I see exactly what he's doing. I don't think those that are around him are actually as qualified as he thinks that they are. But
what do you mean there wouldn't be democracy left?
Because he has managed to take total control over the legislative body. Look at the way that they have bent the knee to him. Mm-hmm. The judiciary, no different. So when you are the executive and you have now full power, what's to stop him? And the answer is nothing. And it's not going to be Epstein that did it, because ultimately somebody will get thrown under the bus. Look at what he's doing right now, for example, with Tish James. Look at what he's doing with Adam Schiff. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to make another bold prediction here on
a lot of predictions at 8 o'clock in the morning.
There's a lot of predictions. Here, take these notes, because mark my words, politically, they're both doomed. All right? I'm telling you right off the bat, this is a political suicide for both Tish James and Adam Schiff.
More of a political homicide.
Well,
they didn't do anything wrong.
But how are they going to be? How are they politically doomed if Senator Schiff comes from a blue state? Attorney General Tish James is here in a blue state. They are elected by the people. How are they doomed politically?
It'll be gerrymander. It will end up being somehow. They will end up being held
races.
Yes, but they will also be held accountable. Mark my words, they will be held accountable for the crimes that they are now looking at. That's Ed Martin who's looking at him. And I know so many people are going to say, oh, my God, Michael Cohen is like bending the knee to Trump. No, what I'm doing is I'm actually telling you the reality. We could talk to each other all day long and we can say, oh, I have 1 million followers, you have 1 million followers. It's the same million followers. 77 million Americans ended up voting for Trump. Mark my words, Ed Martin, the Department of Justice, Pam Bondi, they will figure out exactly how to go after Adam Schiff, how to go after Tish James for these mortgage violations. And they
alleged mortgage violations.
Alleged, correct. Yeah. And they will be held accountable. That's my next prediction here on your show. And I know that I'm right, because if there is a signing of a box which is wrong, and trust me, I know, I went to prison. One of my charges was on my HELOC. I had a low mortgage onto it. I had 80% equity. They held me accountable for a HELOC violation. Theirs is much worse. And rest assured, allegedly, right. So let's go one step even further here. When you have the courts on your side as well, what chance do you have of success? It's why I turn around and I say, doomed.
Yeah. Michael Cohen with lots of predictions this morning. Thanks for coming on.
Donald Trump sat staring at the clock, waiting for it to strike midnight, August 7th. Then he posted on Truth Social. It's midnight. Billions of dollars in tariffs are now flowing into the United States of America. All caps, exclamation mark. After 4 delays in 4 months and a dizzying array of adjustments, President Trump's sweeping tariffs took on over 90 countries, took effect this week, with most foreign goods now facing a baseline 10% tariff and an average tariff rate of over 17%, which is the highest since the Great Depression. So far, Trump's tariffs have only moderately contributed to inflation, with many companies that import the goods absorbing the cost for now. But a lot of companies have signaled that price hikes aren't far off, and some of them are already starting. How might this all look in a real person's life? Well, we've got a real person. To answer that, let's check back in with our old friend Betty and her son Bobby. Bobby's gotten a lot older since then, but we'll update the graphic one of those days. At the moment, Betty has 150,000 miles on her car, but she has to act fast if she wants to buy a new one, because while prices haven't shot up just yet, Cox Automotive, a firm that works with automakers, expects the sticker price of a new model to increase anywhere from 4 to 8% this year alone. Now, think about this. The car, if you don't own a house, the car is probably the most expensive thing you own. 4 to 8% on a new car is a big deal. If you're thinking, Betty, my friend, just buy American. It's a little more complicated than that. Even Ford, which produces 80% of its cars in America, has already paid $1 billion in tariff fees and raised prices on a few models that are made in Mexico. So looks like Betty might have to start walking a little bit more. Now, some new sneakers for those walks might be nice. Plus, Betty's son, Bobby, has aspirations of making the soccer team this year. But high tariffs on countries like Vietnam and India are weighing heavily on the clothing and textile industry. Adidas, Nike, Puma have all announced that they expect to hike prices for their sportswear. The Yale Budget Lab estimates that in the short term, shoe prices are going to shoot up 40% and apparel prices 38%. Bobby's soccer cleats from last year have a big hole in the toe, but they're going to have to do for now. And with a few less exercise outfits, Betty has to do more laundry. Bad news, Procter & Gamble, which makes Tide detergent and tons of other home goods, said in late July it would be raising prices by single-digit percentages after saying in April that the company was doing whatever it could to prevent price hikes. Betty is also an aspiring home chef, as you know, despite how Bobby may feel about her cooking. But even in the kitchen, she feels the pinch of these tariffs on basics like olive oil, often imported from Europe. That's also expected to cost more. And the Brazilian coffee she likes is going to run a few extra dollars because we now have a 50% tariff on Brazil. Worse yet, she can hardly afford to drink away the pain. Tariffs are threatening to raise the price on everything from Irish whiskey to wine from Spain, even on the aluminum that comes from Mexico and is used to make beer cans. For years, this interconnected global economy got Betty the basic consumer goods and cheap prices that she's enjoyed. The president has had his say. That's not going to happen any longer. All right, I want to talk a little more about this, more on how Trump's newest tariffs are going to affect you and me. I'm joined by Caleb Silver, editor-in-chief of Investopedia. Let's go over and sit down and talk about how some of these tariffs are going to affect people. The first point we made, Caleb, is that not everybody's passed them on just yet. Scott Bessent was on TV saying the importer will pay it, and then it's a choice as to whether they pass it on or not. The companies can only make that choice for so long.
Yeah, and we've heard from companies like Walmart who have said, look, the margins are so thin in retail, we have no choice but to pass a lot of those costs on, and they will. But it does depend on where the product is actually finished. That's a big deal, and who's going to pay that tariff. We've heard reports from Goldman Sachs and others that companies and countries are picking up the bill right now before the goods get to the United States. That's not going to last long because it's going to be a trade-off, Ali, between profit margins, which are so important to public companies, and how much they can afford in terms of price elasticity and how much we're willing to pay as consumers before we tap out.
So the conversation about profit margins, we're talking about Procter & Gamble or Best Buy or Nike or Walmart. That's very different from small businesses in America that import things.
Right.
They have no lobbyists. They have no say in the matter.
Right. And there's the president also got rid of the de minimis exemption for products that are $800 or less. So many small businesses depending on those smaller imports just to run their small businesses, whether it's components or finished products. So a lot of people, consumers, small businesses, big enterprises kind of left out here wondering what's going to happen. And the reality is prices are going up.
Let's talk about how you hedge against this. We were just talking about cars. Hard to know. What are you supposed to do? If you're Betty and you need a new car, what do you do? Hope that this all shakes down in a way that's better for you? Hope that car companies entice you because they're worried that you're not going to buy the new car? Like what do you actually, how do you plan for this?
Yeah, you're going to have to look and wait to see if any companies offer some price reductions, and it's all about demand. You know, car companies, the U.S. auto sectors, we used to selling more than 10 million cars a year. We haven't had that in a while because auto mortgage rates, auto lending rates have been so high. But they're just getting more expensive because of the car parts, because of the steel, because of the aluminum, and because they've now gotten rid of that tax break for electric vehicles. So if you're thinking about buying a car, you had your chance over the last couple of months. We saw aggressive buying. The prices are going up.
Are you seeing anybody talking about strategies for the average person that can work? Because inflation is a tricky thing. Inflation is a tricky thing, and inflation as it relates to tariffs are a tricky thing because you've got to calculate what the company's going to do, how this is all going to go down. A lot of things like eggs, bananas, coffee, you can't stockpile. Right. But what is there a strategy that works here?
Yeah, and some companies and some families have been stockpiling in advance. We saw a lot of aggressive retail buying activity over the past couple of months, certainly in the auto sector, but you look across electronics and other sectors, we were buying things maybe we didn't need because we thought prices were going up. So you see that, you certainly see it on the small business side. But there's already so many unknowns. There's threats of tariffs against semiconductors as high as 100%. Allie, we use semiconductors for just about everything right now, but also, what's going to happen with copper tariffs? They were there, they weren't. So there's a lot of uncertainty. Uncertainty paralyzes people, whether you're running a small business, whether you're investing or just trying to run your household.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump is trying really hard to get Jay Powell at the Fed to reduce interest rates. Now, interesting, lots of presidents would like lower interest rates. It looks good on them. It makes people feel better. But we have higher than what he would like as interest rates because we still are trying to get inflation into the right spot. Right. This is generally speaking, the tariff thing is generally speaking inflationary, at least in the short term, until we've all adjusted and we're making all the sneakers we want in America and buying all the coffee, growing all the coffee beans and growing the bananas we want, which isn't going to happen. It is inflationary in the short term.
Yeah, tariffs are inflationary, full stop. And you know what else is potentially inflationary? Lower interest rates and incentivize us to spend more, right? We spend more. That drives up consumer spending, which drives the economy. Good thing, but at the same time, it drives up prices at the same time. So you're facing potentially a double whammy of inflation from tariffs, inflation from lower interest rates. The real reason the president wants lower interest rates is because it'll lower the interest payment we make on our national debt, which is just climbing every single day. That frees up a couple $100 billion potentially for this government to use in whichever way it wants.
But we begin this hour with Texas Republicans turning up the pressure on Democratic legislators who left the state to stop the redistricting scheme. Republicans have unleashed a wave of legal action aimed at forcing them back. In the last 48 hours alone, they've launched lawsuits to strip them of their seats, introduced motions to have law enforcement track them down, and even accused former Congressman Beto O'Rourke of, quote, bribing lawmakers to break quorum by raising money for their travel expenses and legal defense. A district judge has temporarily sided with Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, blocking O'Rourke from providing financial support to the Texas Democrats. But in remarks last night, O'Rourke says he's not backing down.
I was sued by Ken Paxton not once but twice this week. He tried to stop us from holding this rally here today in Fort Worth. He tried to stop us from raising money to support these Democrats in the fight. He lost. And one of the worst things that we could do to Ken Paxton is to right now choose to donate to have the backs of these fighters, and we are not going to let him stop us. Are you with me on that?
And joining us now is the man you just heard, the founder of the organization Powered by People, former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke. Congressman, thank you for coming to the weekend. So you had what you said there about Paxton. I want to read you what he wrote in a post. He wrote, "I just defeated Beto O'Rourke in court. We secured a major victory, stopping runaway Democrats from taking Beto bribes and preventing deceptive fundraising. They told me to come and take it, so I did." Congressman, I don't think I need to ask the question. Just your response.
Yeah, he wanted to stop us from speaking. He wanted to stop us from rallying people to the defense of these brave Texas Democrats, and he wanted to stop us from raising money. We are doing all three. What strikes me about what's going on in this country right now is all of these powerful, wealthy people in institutions, the big law firms, the Ivy League universities, the tech moguls like Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg and Tim Cook obsequiously giving Donald Trump a gold-plated iPhone, that they're all bending the knee. And it appeared almost inevitable, I think, to many in the country and probably to Donald Trump that anyone in his way would do the same. And I think that's what motivated him to try to come to Texas and steal 5 congressional districts in this state so that he could hold on to power in the House of Representatives. But I don't think he counted on the fact that in Texas, our knees don't bend. We're not giving in. We're not giving up. We're not going to go away. We're going to fight these people. We're going to fight them until we win. It's those 54 Democrats who broke quorum, left the state, and stopped them from redistricting. It's tens of thousands more who are having their backs by donating to support them. And it's everyone who's organizing right now so that we win political power in 2026 and stop this guy from producing the slide into authoritarianism that is our future and our fate unless we do everything we can with what we've got right now.
Even with this temporary restraining order that is from the judge, you guys are still fundraising. You obviously held that rally. But I'm also curious, what are the other types of things? You shouldn't do them. Bless you, honey.
Excuse me.
What are the other types of things that you guys could be doing? Because, you know, with the Democrats, the House Democrats, and the leaving the state, that means there could be a vacuum within the state of people who are only hearing from Paxton, people who are only hearing from the governor, Abbott, about these things and missing the stories that you're telling here on our network. So are you guys going to, you know, red parts of the state, knocking on doors and letting people know the truth?
Absolutely. So we had thousands with us last night in Fort Worth, Tarrant County, often referred to as the last reliably red urban county in America. Not going to be very red for very much longer. But later today, actually, after I finish speaking with you, Eugene and Jonathan, I am going to Abilene, Texas. I think that's a county, Taylor County, that voted for Donald Trump 72 or 73% in the last election. But we're not writing them off. We're going to show up there. Hundreds have already RSVP'd for the event. But we're also going to other parts of the country to make the case and remind everybody we're in this together. In Oklahoma City 3 nights ago, 1,500 people came out 15 months before an election. Similar crowds in Omaha, in Kansas City, in Indianapolis, in Milwaukee. We were in Louisiana just 2 nights ago. I mean, we're going everywhere, bringing everyone together so that we are united in this fight. Our unity is our greatest leverage, our greatest strength, and we've got to use it against these guys before they steal this country.
Congressman, the lieutenant governor of Texas said something that on Tuesday, so almost a week ago, but it is so breathtaking and outrageous that I want to play it for you and get your reaction on the other side.
Whatever it takes, Sean, whatever it takes, we're going to get it done. There's nothing they can do to stop us. And I challenge them. Come back and do the right thing. Don't run and hide because you've lost touch with the voters. Their problem are not redistricting lines. Their problem, Sean, is they've lost the minds of their voters who are moving towards the Republican Party all over the country. We're a red state. We deserve more representation.
Congressman, quote, we're a red state. We deserve more representation. This is what I found outrageous.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think it's super clear that Republicans care about power and nothing else. And for far too long, Democrats have cared about being right, coloring within the lines, following rules. And power has always been a secondary consideration. We need to absolutely flip that around and focus on power exclusively. It's why I'm encouraged by what I'm hearing by Governor Newsom in California, Governor Pritzker in Illinois, even Governor Hochul in New York. They're talking about seizing the initiative and redrawing their congressional boundaries to maximize Democratic Party advantage. We got to fight fire with fire. I mean, we wish the refs were going to call the fouls, that there were going to be penalties for what they are doing right now, but the refs have left the arena.
Yeah, they're or corrupted.
And to fight this out and to win. We got to be focused on it.
Congressman, but do you have, in going off of what you just said, do you have any concerns? Because I've talked to folks, especially folks that have been in the redistricting space, who have tried to, democratize redistricting with independent redistricting efforts around the country. Democrats, are the only ones that have been actually doing that in different states. That's why their hands are tied behind their backs in some places. But do you have any concerns about lawmakers being able to choose their voters? Because that is essentially what gerrymandering is, right? With these weirdly shaped spaces and people choosing their voters instead of the other way around.
Absolutely. No one likes it. And I think that is what motivated Democrats in states like California to adopt these independent citizen-led redistricting commissions, which is a great idea if it is applied to every state at the same time. Effectively, though, what California did was to unilaterally disarm in the face of Texas being free to gerrymander their congressional districts, as they're attempting to do right now, to steal 5 congressional seats in our state. Because just to remind everybody why this is happening, Donald Trump's policies, the cuts to Medicaid, the terrorizing our fellow Americans with these Gestapo tactics, the massive transfers of wealth from working people to the richest 1%. Deeply unpopular stuff. There's no way he holds on to the House of Representatives unless he can rig the game now in the summer of 2025 to try to steal the election in 2026. So, Eugene, I do think it's incumbent upon Democrats to stop this, to win power, and then once in power, to apply this idea of getting politicians out of the room when there's redistricting, to return that power to the people, but to do it comprehensively across the country and not selectively just in blue states.
Congressman, we have less than a minute left, but you were talking about Democrats fighting back against the redistricting efforts. How else should Democrats be fighting back? Because there are a lot of fronts in this battle to, withstand autocracy and to save our democracy. Should Democrats be doing more?
Absolutely. In 2024, we bore witness to the Democratic Party nationally spending more than $1 billion in 7 states, each of which we lost. I'm going to the other 43 right now to remind us all that we need to fight these folks on every single front, to your point, Jonathan. So in Omaha, where we were just a few nights ago, that's the seat Don Bacon is retiring from. We can win that seat. In Oklahoma City, where we were the night after that, we can win that seat. We could pick up seats even in Louisiana, in Missouri, in Kansas. We've got to be a 50-state party or we will not be a national threat. And so we've got to show up everywhere for everyone, write nobody off and take no one for granted. And we've got to organize now in 2025 to win power in 2026.